why not sit back and relax and take things easy like a Sunday morn? I'm your host, Shane Lockwood, and this is episode 63. Today is the 1st of May 2017. Welcome once again to my regular listeners, and if you're listening for the very first time, take a seat and relax, maybe with your favorite beverage or two, and we can get started. This is a podcast that is designed to give you the mental space you need to either relax or plan your day or week, or just use it to time yourself exercising for 30 minutes or so and listen to my voice to take your mind off what you're doing, or even to help you drift off to sleep. There is usually a moment of silence very early on Sunday mornings where people are recovering from the weekend, they're sleeping in, etc., etc. So why not use that time to be creative, to plan your week ahead, let go of the garbage from the week before, and have a positive attitude going into next week. Now, it's been a month since my last episode, so we'll update you with all of the goings on since then. If you haven't already heard it, please go back to episode 62 and hear me discuss the Red Dwarf Sci-Fi convention way back in February. I know that I messed up the settings on Spreaker, and that meant that I wasn't broadcasting that particular episode over the iHeartRadio network. If you do listen to this podcast via the iHeartRadio network, I ask you humbly, please, to look for episode 62 on the newly named Apple Podcasts. It was formerly iTunes. It's now called Apple Podcasts. Or maybe look it up on YouTube. You should be able to find it. And maybe leave a review on Apple Podcasts while you're there, or give it a thumbs up on YouTube. If you are listening to this through YouTube or any other podcast aggregator, please give it a thumb up if you like it. You don't need to vote for it now. Listen to the rest of the show and see what you like, what you don't like, and review the podcast accordingly. Do appreciate feedback. Now, I don't know how to sugarcoat this, but I was involved in a car accident about 4 weeks ago. A woman pulled out of a side street onto a very busy main road and sideswiped us. I was on the passenger side of a sturdy white work van, and she was in a minivan with her son, possibly taking him to school, as it was 8 a.m. in the morning when this happened, and he had a school bag on his back. Her front end was completely totaled, and the impact blew her metal license plate in half and across the road, and there was plastic and glass everywhere. The van I was in had the front left tyre pushed in to a 30-degree angle, and there was a massive scratch along the side of the van as we were moving at 60 kilometers an hour at the time, which is I think about 30 miles an hour. We had comprehensive insurance, but that didn't cover car hire rental. So make sure your insurance policy does cover that. If you have a work vehicle and you have an accident, you do have to make sure that you can get a replacement work vehicle free of charge, no money out of pocket. Your insurance company should actually pay for that. If they don't, it's a very, very bad policy. Some of the richer insurance companies are very, very reluctant to pay anything, and they will use any legal loophole that they can to avoid helping you out where possible. So just be aware of that. Do check that out with your own policies. My friend had to hire a van for 21 days and then found out that it'd be another 2 weeks before his van is fixed again. That'll be next week, I think, he picks it up. And so he's had to hire 2 work vans from these rental companies. The repair bill for the van that got damaged was $8,500. Insane. And I would hate to see what the repair bill would be for the other vehicle, because the entire front end was, well, gone. And there was a big hole where the license plate was. The license plate was split in half, like I said. She lost both front headlight, and because the cars these days are largely plastic, the whole thing just crumpled. Her car was undrivable. Ours was, you could probably drive it, but we noticed that the wheel was at that 30-degree angle. No, I shouldn't say 30 degree, but I don't have the chance to work it out. Yeah, actually, I will do that. Okay, from a 360-degree circle angle, you chop that in half, so that's 180 degrees up and down. So you take away 30 degrees from 180, that's 150 degrees. So if you do with your protractor 150 degrees, that's where the angle of the tyre was. But yeah, so that was undrivable. So once again, make sure your insurance company does cover work vehicles and things like that. Importantly, no one was hurt physically, but psychologically, both my friend and I, my friend who was driving, are now ultra aware of cars pulling out of side streets and doing stupid stuff, driving through intersections without indicating and stuff like that. I think that normally when you're driving, you build up like a tolerance to that sort of behavior. But once you have an accident, a lot of that gets stripped away. So you start projecting and flinching and tensing up every time someone pulls out or does something silly. There's a few incidents where I snapped at my friend because he wasn't either using his horn or he wasn't reacting in time. I was overreacting. But there are some really silly incidents where people were pulling out across the road, like halfway across a double lane road, and not realizing that they'd come out too far, and you got people speeding along. And so do be careful on the roads. You don't know how a single accident could ruin your business if you are not insured. So that's my lesson for the day, and it set my progress back of wanting to learn to drive. It set that back a little bit, but I will soldier on regardless, as always. Okay, now a few people have asked about my 50 weeks until awesome program that I started exactly 1 year ago last week. The basic idea was to make small weekly changes over a year and to see where I would end up, what goals I would accomplish, and I also encouraged you listeners to do the same. Some people have reported that they have lost weight and were exercising more, and some of you were also saving money, which is always good to hear. For me personally, I started last year at 120 kilograms and not being able to move furniture. I was generally unhappy with my life. My computer had died, so had my phone. I was out of work, I was broke, etc., etc. Things were just not looking very, very good at all. Fast forward to today, a year later, and I'm 109 kilograms, having dropped down to 102 kilograms about 6 months ago, but I've had a myriad of setbacks which have led to my weight going up again. However, I'm a lot stronger. I'm able to lift 15 kilogram dumbbells from not being able to lift 5 kilogram dumbbells. I'm down 3 belt sizes. I've had to drill them myself. I have larger biceps, not exactly massive, but they are visible, and I can carry large air conditioners for my friend who runs a air conditioning business. I've just finished a Certificate 3 in warehousing and distribution course, which was something that I hadn't actually envisioned myself doing last year. In fact, I was rather reluctant to do it at all, but I came to enjoy it, and I enjoyed the people that I was studying with and the lecturer. The people running the course needed a bit of an attitude adjustment, I think, and they should have provided modules and things like that a lot earlier. But I finished all the core coursework. I've just got to wait on a few more modules to finalize and get a few signatures and stuff like that. But I finished the course, which is absolutely fantastic. Another fantastic thing that I did was I got a 10-kilometer walking achievement on one of my fitness apps. I've done it before, but it's been a few months since I've actually been able to achieve that challenge, so it's been great to get that out of the way. Another aspect of the 52 weeks of awesome is that it was to celebrate the anniversary of this particular podcast, and this podcast is now 3 years old. I hadn't even thought of it. 3 years old. Anyway, what I'm going to be doing over the next year is I'm going to be doing another 52 weeks of awesome. I'm going to be setting a whole series of really small weekly goals and once again see how far I can get this time next year. And I do humbly invite you to join in and give me your feedback as to what you hope to achieve, and maybe a year from now what you actually have achieved. It's important to write down your bigger goal and write down your smaller 52 chunks of that bigger goal. You may not be able to do things weekly. If you do them every second week or maybe every month, do it that way. And the reason it's a year long is because life happens, sabotage happens. People get in your way. I've had people try and sabotage my diet by going to restaurants or, oh, come and hang out with me and we'll do nothing all day. Things like that do not help you at all. And there's the things you need to be aware of, that there are people trying to do that. Not every one of your acquaintances has your best interests at heart. That is not to be an alarmist or to say you should cut your friends out of your life. Just be very, very careful and be very, very aware of that sort of thing, right? And don't tell anybody. I don't mind feedback because this is a sort of a personal project of mine, but if I help anybody to turn their life around, to improve their health or anything like that, improve their finances or whatever, then so be it. I like to hear that sort of stuff. I like feedback on the show, and I like to know that I'm turning people's lives around, or at least giving them the space and the reminder that they are the one in charge of their lives and they are the ones that can turn things around. Maybe you're in an unhappy relationship. Maybe over the next year, you could either be improving yourself, improving your partner, improving your relationship, or maybe you learn the skills to become a better person and realize that the relationship you're in is not working and cannot be salvaged and therefore needs to be ended. But it's your choice. It's about educating yourself with the different options with life in general. It's not extreme. It's over a year. You can do, and you're giving yourself a week to achieve each thing. So you can incorporate that into your very, very busy lifestyle, your very busy schedules, if you happen to do so, if you have to do it that way. And you can find 30 minutes a week to be able to do that. That's what this podcast is for. It's not about telling you what to do. It's not about being like Tony Robbins and saying, oh yeah, you can do it, and hyping you up. It's about a self-reflecting exercise. What can you do? What can you do to change your situation today so that things are much different a year from now? Maybe it's going for a walk around the block. Maybe it's joining a gym. Gyms can be expensive. Do your own research. I'm compiling prices of my local gyms right now. Even if it's plucking up the courage just to walk into a gym, for example. Maybe you have no interest in gyms whatsoever. Maybe you want to study. Maybe you want to go on to higher education. Maybe you want to get a driver's license. Every week, for example, after you've got your learner's test, every week you might have a driving lesson. So how good of a driver would you be after 52 weeks of driving lessons? Things like that. Nothing too extreme, except I'm very against extremism of any kind. Maybe you want to improve your diet, for example. You could do 52 weeks of incorporating more vegetables, for example. Or maybe you have one day a week where you don't eat meat, or you can incorporate different ideas. It depends on what you want to achieve. It's your life, and it's about creating a space where you can forget everybody else, forget everything that happened the week before, forget all your plans and things like that for the next week, clear your mind completely, and then start again, refreshed, renewed from a blank slate, and empower yourself. That's what I wanted this podcast to be about. Personal empowerment, empowering me, empowering you, empowering everybody around us. Maybe even if you just want to learn how to meditate or learn how to take up archery or rifle shooting, or there's a million other things you could be doing. And a lot of these places, education places, tertiary education places, have very short courses that are run over a series of weeks. And you might have, on a Saturday, you might have 2 hours of archery, for example, and it might run for, say, 6 weeks or something like that. Well, there's 6 weeks, and you're better off at archery than you were when you started, because you would have had zero skills when you started. 6 weeks later, you're 6 weeks better. Now imagine that over, say, 52 weeks. There's a lot you can actually achieve in a year. I started looking at trying to learn parkour, which is a form of acrobatic, and Right now I'm still in the body conditioning stage. I've still got to lose a fair bit of weight, but I'm strengthening my joints whenever I can. So that's a lot of wrist rotations and things like that. Rotating my ankles because there's a lot of jumping and landing. You have to land a certain way. You land with your feet together, and there's a whole heap of conditioning and things involved. My focus was never on weight loss itself. Weight loss is a side effect of wanting to become fitter, healthier, to be able to function better as a human being in this society. Bruce Lee talked about self-actualization, about being the maximum potential that he could possibly be. And we all know that Bruce Lee could punch really fast and very powerful. You might not know that he actually did a lot of weightlifting, and he's actually quite muscly. His physique is very thin, but when he flexes his muscles and his back is actually quite large. He actually had to stop lifting weights because his body size was slowing him down, and he was aiming for that optimum thing. Now, I'm not crazy in that respect. I'm not looking for extremes. I just wanted to be the best person that I can be, and I am encouraging you to do the same at your own pace, whatever you're comfortable with, whatever level you are at. There's always another level you can go to. Give a year to get to that level. That's all the 52 weeks of awesome is all about. And it's not about giving people fake promises of, you can do this, you can do anything, and hyping people up and doing things like that. This is a slow and steady progression, and it may be too slow for you. Maybe you want to do things over 6 months, over 3 months, over a month and a half, or something like that. So then it doesn't have to be once a week. It can be once a day. It depends on your schedule, how busy you are. 5 minutes here, 30 minutes there, an hour there, all adding up to something decent and fantastic over time. I'm aiming for a full driver's license, a forklift license, now that I've got this Cert 3 in warehousing and distribution course under my belt, and a white card. For those of you that don't know, a white card is a card that allows me to work on construction sites and things like that. It's just a health and safety thing. It's a one-day course, but it's a little bit out of my price range at the moment, but that's one of those things that hopefully before the end of this month I will have. So those are the sorts of things that I'm working on. Yeah, but these things aren't cheap. So you split the goal into bite-sized chunks, achievable chunks, and you just keep moving and moving and moving and moving. Even if life has a way of sidetracking you a little bit, it's about reassessing and getting back on that horse, quite figuratively, of course. Unless you want to learn a horseback riding in the next year. So 52 weekly lessons of horseback riding, for example, will make you a better rider than if you had never started. Anyway, if this has inspired you to improve your life in any way, shape, or form, my contact details are down below, especially for feedback for the show. Speaking of shows, there are some cool TV shows that I've been enjoying lately. Samurai Jack has returned after a 15-year hiatus for its 5th and final season. The quality of the animation is absolutely superb, and the music is excellent. You don't need to see the previous 4 seasons to figure out what is going on in the show. He's a samurai teleported into the present day and sometimes further into the future, and he is fighting an evil demon named Aku. And his whole goal is that he wants to get back to his own timeline and save his people. It's very, very good. Very artistic, like I said before. Music is fantastic, and it's very cinematic in it, the way it's depicted, even though it's an animation. It's not Japanese, it's actually American, about a Japanese character being played by a black actor by the name of Phil Lamar. It's funny how there's nobody, complaining about cultural appropriation. A black guy pretending to be a Japanese guy. Strange. Star Wars Rebels has started to get better after having a series of boring episodes. Upcoming season 4 will be the final season, hopefully leading into either Rogue One or Star Wars A New Hope, which is the very first movie they made. And season 3 was fine. It did have the boring episodes, and it did end rather nicely with a hint of Obi-Wan Kenobi killing Darth Maul, mild spoiler, and overseeing the farm that Luke is raised on. So hopefully the series will actually end and we'll see a bit more of Luke. They haven't shown a lot of Luke in Rebels. They haven't shown a lot of the characters in Rebels, but they did have Princess Leia they did. They had Princess Leia, and they had Mon Mothma. They had Lando Calrissian. They had R2D2 and C3PO. So it'd be interesting to see what they do with that. But they had Leia as a bit more forward thinking and a bit more adult. So I don't know what they were going to do with a very young Luke Skywalker, given that they're actually twins. Rick and Morty released the first episode of season 3 to tide the fans over, including myself, but there is no real word on when the series will get a proper air date. It was just the first episode. The episode in question was excellent and will keep you guessing until the end. I can't wait for it to start again. This one is not for kids though, as there is swearing and sometimes adult concepts. A show that is definitely not for kids is one called Broadchurch, and series 3 has just finished with a very interesting but different storyline to the previous 2 seasons. But it follows on very nicely, and the characters, their story arcs match between the seasons, and there's a follow-on. The show is about 2 detectives that initially are brought in to solve a murder of a young boy, and they start following that case, discover who did it, and then there's the court case, and then figuring out what goes on after that. And then there's another case with season 3, so it starts again, and they keep going on and on. There's lots of red herrings, like you think it's this person, then you think it's this person, then you think it's that person, and then there's this final reveal of just a simple clue, and you know who did it. Then, of course, next season will be about them pressing charges and then trying to convict who they think it is, and things like that. I'm looking forward to that one, and the problem is you've got to wait so long between seasons. But this again is not for children because it's very adults only. It's not an animation, it's a live action TV series starring David Tennant, who used to be the 10th Doctor on Doctor Who, and Olivia Colman, who played a villain on Doctor Who. Speaking of Doctor Who, the show is back with Series 10, with Peter Capaldi returning to play the Doctor, and there's a new female companion by the name of Billy. If you are unfamiliar with Doctor Who, this season very quickly updates you on what the show is about, while not alienating existing fans. This season is pretty good so far, but one of my gripes with sci-fi shows and movies is that they are often either shot at night or they are underlit. You've got a space show set in space at night. That's ridiculous, right? There's a show called The Expanse that someone had recommended to me, but I find it very difficult to watch, largely because it's just so poorly lit on board the spaceship, the one area that you would think would be full of lights. But anyway, speaking of sci-fi movies that have got the lighting right, I saw the latest Guardians of the Galaxy movie. It's absolutely hilarious, with lots of surprise cameos, great acting, strong female characters, some good moral storylines, while having a strong family focus and plenty of dancing. There's lots of cool stuff for fans, lots of Easter eggs, and there's a little bit of a tearjerker aspect to the movie as well. So do watch out for that. I do suggest seeing the very first movie before you see the second one, just to see the significance of certain characters, certain moments, and certain objects that come into being and come into play in the second movie. And there's also a lot of in-jokes and things like that once you know who the characters are. Coming from the first movie to the second movie, there's a bit of a carryover with that. And there's an emotional impact that doesn't have the same gravitas if you don't see the first movie. So that's Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, well worth checking out. And for those of you who are fans of the Marvel movie, you will know that there's a cameo by Stan Lee, the creator of, at least a writer of, a lot of the characters within the Marvel comics. Spider-Man, Hulk, Thor, etc., Captain America. So he gets to be in a cameo of all of these movies. Now, he had nothing to do with Guardians of the Galaxy, but they've put him in as just like a little teaser thing. But I'm not going to spoil the movie. Do go and see it for yourself. There are adult concepts, but it's fine for children. Another thing that happened was there was a trailer for the Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi, which is rather controversial in that Luke talks about how the Jedi need to end. Now, is that the end of the Order of Jedi Knights? Or is it the Order of the Name Jedi? As in they need to be called something else? Or is he dying and giving up after losing his previous Jedi school? If you follow the lines of dialogue that are spoken by Han Solo in The Force Awakens, it turns out that Luke tried to train his son Ben Solo, and Ben had turned to evil and basically had wiped out the other Jedi, and Luke went into hiding for 10 years, and that's why he was not very prominent in The Force Awakens. Hopefully he will be a lot more prominent in the next film. There's nothing worse than having to wait 33 years to see Luke do some acrobatics, and instead the first words you see on the opening crawl are, "Luke has vanished." And the only person doing any acrobatics at all was Han Solo, falling off the ledge after being, spoiler warning, stabbed by his son, Kylo Ren, who was formerly Ben Solo but changed his name once he became a student of Lord Snoke. And that brings us to the segment of the show that I like to call the code word. And for those of you who don't know, I started adding code words to my podcast just to let me know via feedback who was actually listening to the podcast all the way through. And today's code word is the word support, as in this show is supported by its Patreon supporters. Thank you, Darren and Elvin, for your generous donations. You are keeping this podcast alive. If you would like to support this podcast, please go over to patreon.com/ELASM. Make a $1 donation per episode. It's set to per episode rather than monthly because last month there wasn't an episode. I don't believe in charging people for content that doesn't exist. There are a lot of people who do that. I don't believe in it. That is dishonest. If you don't wish to become a Patreon supporter, but you love what I do here and you do want to support me, but you for some reason can't afford a single dollar or 50p, all you have to do is find this show on iTunes, which I think is now called Apple Podcasts, and give it a review. If you're listening to this on YouTube, please give this a thumbs up or a thumbs down, whichever you prefer. Leave a comment using the code word support. Give me feedback, what you like, what you want to hear, what you don't want to hear. I know this is not a particularly good episode because I'm just catching up, getting back into the game after recovering from a car accident and so on and so forth. But I hope you have a fantastic day today and carry that sense of tranquility and peace and enjoyment from today into next week, and I will see you in the next episode. But before I go, I just wanted to say a special thank you to Hayden Grigg for helping me to redesign a new logo for for this podcast. It can be seen in all its glory for free for my Patreon supporters. And if you are a member of the Facebook group, you will see it as the banner logo. So thank you very much, Hayden. Hope that you enjoyed this podcast. Hope everybody enjoyed this podcast. May you have a fantastic day today. And until I meet you again, and take every day and every moment easy like a Sunday morn. Bye for now.